Please join me in welcoming Mr. Dave Lieber.
Thanks, David. Thank you. So, he says I work in Dallas, and I'm not a native Texan. Any native Texans here? A few over there? So, when I moved to Texas 25 years ago, and don't ever move to Texas in the summer like I did, the Texans are very welcoming people, and they ask you a series of questions. And the one question that I got asked everywhere I went, it's the state motto. They go, "Boy, where are you from?" And when I would tell them where I was from, they would quote back a picante sauce commercial on television at the time. I don't know if you remember, but they'd go, "Where's this picante sauce from?" And the guy would go, "New York City." And then they go, "New York City, get a rope." And so everywhere I went, the Texans would say, "New York City, get a rope." And I didn't know what that meant, because if I did, I wouldn't have stuck around. But, you know, I grew up on Broadway and 78th Street in Manhattan, which is a lot different from Dallas and Fort Worth. And so the Texans, they have it in the DNA to connect with the human beings by asking a series of questions. So they didn't stop with that first question. They'd give me a second chance, and they'd ask me this one question that I never got asked anywhere else that I ever lived in. In Texas, you get asked almost every day. They'd lean in and they go, "Yankee boy, what church do you go to?" And I would say, "I don't go to any church." They go, "Why not, Yankee boy? Don't you believe in the Lord?" And I go, "No, I do." "Then why don't you go to church?" And I give them the absolute wrong answer. Back in Fort Worth in 1993, I'd say, "Because I'm Jewish." And they would kind of fall back, you know. But the Texans, it's in the DNA of a Texan to connect with people, unlike Manhattan folk. So they'd come back real quick and they go, okay, I know a Jewish boy in the Army 20 years ago. "Oh, do you know Lieutenant Harry Cohen?" And I say, "No, man, it's a big tribe, you know." And then they'd come back with a third question. They'd say, "Well, what does your wife do?" And I say, "Well, I'm divorced." And they would just drop their shoulders. They would run out of stuff to say. And then they go, "Okay, Yankee boy, last chance. You got any kids?" And I'd say, "Nope." At that point, they go, "Bye." And I could not make a friend when I got to Texas because I couldn't answer the questions correctly. And this was a problem because I was hired to be a columnist at the Fort Worth newspaper. I had never been to Texas before. I didn't know what made them laugh or cry. I didn't know how to talk to them. I didn't know what they cared about. So my first week, I wrote a column saying, "Hey, everybody, I'm new here, and I'm learning so much, and I don't know what this three-word expression is. I've never heard of it before. Chicken fried steak." And then I wrote in the newspaper, "Is it chicken or is it steak?" And the Texans were so horrified that they started calling the newspaper to complain about me. They were like, "Okay, this moron from New York is now our newspaper columnist?" This one guy called, his name was Billy Bob Joe Earl Smith. He called up and he said, "Mr. Lieber, I've been reading the Star Telegram for 46 years, and that right there is the worst piece of writing I've ever seen." "Boy, where are you from?" "What church do you go to?" And he was so upset to hear who they had hired that he launched a campaign to get rid of me. But I didn't care because, I think I kind of deserved it. I didn't fit in. I realized right away that I was in a dilemma. I was covering people different from me. I was covering Republican, Baptist, married, native Texan, conservative people. And none of them said, "What we need here to cover us is a liberal, divorced, Democratic, New York City Jew." So that was my dilemma and how I started out. Let me stop and show you what I just did in my opening box that you gave me a couple of minutes to introduce myself. And I didn't do it with the PowerPoint, and I didn't do it by reading bullet points. I told you a personal story about where my problem was and how I had to overcome this journey. And the reason I did that is because I know that if you're not speaking in stories, you're not speaking. And when I tell a story, you should see your faces just a moment ago. They were laughing, they were smiling. I wish I could take a picture of you. But now that I've stopped telling a story, your neural brain endings, which you have billions of neural brain endings, they've kind of drooped. Because when you tell a story, they get all excited and they flare up, you know. But when you start to do bullet points and you read, PowerPoint off a slide, you kind of go, "Okay." Because that's just the way it is. And I know that so many of you are locked in the science community, and you have to tell it a certain way, but I think what I want to do here today is I want to change your life. I want to show you a formula for storytelling that I've used in newspapers for 42 years, because that's how long I've worked in newspapers, 42 years. And I want to show you how to use it, and I want to show you how to do what you do in a way that you've never thought before. You know, I'm so impressed with you because I've been doing this a long time, and groups that know that storytelling is the key to their future are brilliant. So let me just say you all are brilliant, okay? Because they used to say you needed a website to be in business in America. But now the website's no longer true. You need to have a story. And people really don't know how to tell a story in the business world. They know how to tell a story to their family and their friends on the phone or at the bar or in the hotel lobby. You tell great stories. But when it comes to telling the business story, people kind of tend to freeze up. And I love the fact that you guys are doing this because I read in a survey, I read a study from Goldfish from 2015 all about your communication problems, that people don't know who you are and what you do. And I love this because in this paper from Goldfish, she talks about how your industry is, quote, not top of mind. And she also says that the public is relatively uninformed about what you do. And I would say I read 5 newspapers a day. My fingers are ink stained, and when I touch the wall, you can see I was there. And I read about 20 magazines that I subscribe to do. And I'll be honest, I never heard the word aquaculture before I heard from Mr. Klein, Dr. Klein. I didn't know what it was. It just never crossed my radar, which is a good thing for you because you get to start from scratch in a lot of ways. A lot of people haven't been paying attention. The word itself is a tough word, aquaculture. I've had to practice it at home so I don't mess it up. Aquaculture, aquaculture. There's too much going on in the word, but that's okay. You don't have to change the word. You just have to figure out a way to make the word sing like a beautiful song. I am a fanboy of what you do. I didn't even realize I was a fanboy. I made up a word to describe me. I am a philo-agriculturalist, which means a lover of agriculturalists. And the reason I am a lover of aquaculturalists is because I like to eat seafood. I live in Fort Worth, and does anyone here know the nickname for Fort Worth? It's Cowtown. So when I got there 25 years ago, I realized I was going to die because all they serve is meat. Their idea of a vegetable is barbecue sauce, right? So the way to counteract that was to order fish. I order fish all the time. And I don't really care if it comes from the ocean or from a farm. It makes me feel like I'm healthy. Also, I probably should tell you real quickly that 2 months ago, the local deli in Grapevine, Texas, which is right outside DFW Airport, they named a sandwich after me, a seafood sandwich. You can go there now and you can buy Lieber's lobster roll. Isn't that cool? I told the guy, I said, I'm going to Maine to eat lobster roll. He says, I'm thinking of adding a lobster roll to my menu. He already has 100 sandwiches on there. So I took pictures of every lobster roll I had. That's all I had in Maine. Anybody here from Maine? I had lobster roll for breakfast, lunch, and dinner for like 4 days in a row. I took pictures of the menu. When I came back, I gave him all the stuff. So he names it Mobster Lobster Roll. And later on, he changed it to Lieber's Lobster Roll because he says he wasn't going to put my name on it unless it was a hit. Well, it turned out to be such a hit that it's now the number 2 selling sandwich at this place. Italian beef, Lieber's Lobster Roll, and the Reuben. I mean, I just never could have imagined. I just think that's a lot of fun, and I'm really proud of that. I think what you also don't probably realize about yourself is that you don't work in the aquaculture industry per se. That's really not what you do. What you do is you save humanity from itself. You have a much bigger job. I look at you as the saviors of humanity because what I read in studying for this was that the world population is going to increase by 2 billion people by the year 2050. And if you don't do your job correctly, we're going to starve and die and have to move to Mars. I don't want to put any pressure on you or anything like that. But as a newspaper man, if I were writing a story about this conference, I think maybe my lead would be 1,800 people met in Las Vegas at a World Aquaculture Conference yesterday in the hopes of saving humanity. Quote, David Klein, one of the organizers of the event, said that the world population will increase by 2 billion by 2050, and unless we learn how to feed the world properly, we're going to have major problems, unquote. You'd love to see that story, wouldn't you, David? Of course, that's not how it works, but that's really what I think you guys should be stressing. So what I want to do is I want to show you the formula for storytelling, But before I do, I want to excite your neural endings a little bit because I've been giving you bullet point learning here, and it's not very exciting. So I'm going to go into a storytelling mode here, and watch what happens to your brain as I switch around, okay? So when I moved to Texas, I didn't know anything at all, and I certainly didn't understand the food. I mentioned the barbecue already, but it turns out that they have this thing called Tex-Mex. And I had never heard of Tex-Mex before, and so I decided to go to a restaurant, and the lady gave me the menu, the waitress, and I didn't understand anything in it because it was all in Spanish. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what chili con queso was, or enchiladas, or there was one thing I thought if I ordered it, it would come attack me, chimichanga, you know. And the waitress comes over, and I said, ma'am, you gave me the Spanish menu, and I don't know what this is. Do you have an English menu? And she goes, this is our menu, sir. And I said, well, I don't know what to get. She said, well, get this. This is our best dish. And I said, okay, give me some fajitas. And she smiled, but she didn't correct me. And I remember she comes back with all these plates, and I didn't know what they were. There was a stack of white pancakes. There was this creamy white sauce. There was some meat. There was some cheese. There was some peppers. There was some onions. And there was this giant green glob of snot. I didn't know what it was. And I started to eat everything separately, because that's in Manhattan, we're not that smart about other outside of. And so I took the pancake and I took a bite out of it, and I stabbed the meat with a fork, and then I took the glob and I started eating with a spoon, and the glob was good, but I didn't know what it was. And the waitress comes over and she says, sir, that's not how you eat a fajita. I said, oh, fajita, because I was going to write a story about this. Fajita. She says, she taught me all these new words. She said, you take the tortilla, okay, tortilla, and you put the sour cream on, and then you put the peppers and the onions and the meat, and you sprinkle the cheese, and then you put the guacamole on. Okay, I never heard that word, guacamole. And then she says you roll it up and you eat it. So I had never seen anybody do it before, and there wasn't YouTube yet to look it up. So I just started to roll it, and I rolled it way too tight. I rolled it the way they're rolling in Colorado now and here in Nevada. Whoa. And when I picked up, I had the world's longest, thinnest, tightest fajita, and when I took a bite out of it, everything just shot out. But I didn't care because I was on my second Texas-sized margarita. Okay, now stop, and you're all smiling. It's beautiful, I love it. Okay, now I'm going to stop, and now permission to get bored because the neural endings are going to die. The story did have a point. The story did show my total ignorant attitude when I moved and how I didn't understand the basics of the food and the clothing and everything. So, you see my point? You see how the neural endings rise? Let me show you how to tell a story. I brought this paintbrush, and I want to pretend that I have a bucket of paint here, and I'm going to paint the formula for the storytelling that I've used for 40 years. How many of you are scientists? You love formulas, don't you? But your formulas are very complicated. Mine is really simple. I'm going to dip this in the paint, dip it in the paint, and now I'm going to do a straight line going across, and then I'm going to do a V, and then I'm going to do a curly Q. And that is the storytelling formula that has saved my butt for 42 years and allowed me to survive in a business where everybody around me has gotten laid off. Shoot, shoot, shoot. Very simple. Most storytelling formulas that I've seen taught by academics and stuff are like this. And I'm like, no. Okay? So a story is pretty simple. It's got a beginning, a middle, and an end. Okay? It's got a hero that goes out into the world. Here's where you meet the hero at the top. And then the hero goes out in the world and meets the villain, and the villain drives the hero down to the low point. And we all know what I'm talking about because this is what TV and movies are. And the villain can be anything. It can be a person, a place, a thing. It can be your enemy. It can be your friend. It can be the people that don't understand what you do. It can be ignorance. It can just be anything. So the hero goes out into the world, meets the villain drives the hero down to the low point. The low point is the most important part of the story. Not the ending where everything works out, but the part where there's the pain. And that's where you come in, because you guys are in the business of easing the pain, of building, of creating, making things safe, economical, healthy, right? So you have to do something to get out of this low point. You just can't say, okay, I'm getting out of the low point, because that's not how it works in TV and movies. You have to do what I call the heroic trait. You have to show the heroic trait. You have to do something at the bottom, at that low point, which is that most important part, and you have to turn it with a heroic trait, something you've never done before, some super trait. You got to be like the Black Panther. You got to go up. And then you fight that hero, you fight that villain when you've done that heroic turn. And that villain's pushing you back down because he doesn't give up so easy. But in the end, you get to the top of the V, and that's where you have the happy ending, the climax of the story, where you win. And that little curlicue at the end, is the tying up of the loose ends of a story. So in my particular case, I tell a story about a dog, and if I don't get to the end, people come up to me and go, is the dog still alive? Because they've got to know how it ends. Because if you tell a story and you don't tell it at the end, people are like, well, what happened? What happened? So everybody in this room knows how to do this. Because this is what you do every single day in your life. Your life is like a V. Oh my God, the traffic was so bad. And then I got to the point where there was a wreck. But to get out of it, I just had to, and then you do something really weird to get out of that thing and to get here on time. So you call up your friends and you go, you won't believe what just happened. I was just going in, all of a sudden, blank, blank, blank. But then something really cool happened, and I got out. So you talk like this. This is how humans communicate. This is how they communicated in the cave that we saw on the screen. They showed the story of going out and hunting. Oh my God, I'm so scared. There's a big beast, but I can do it because I'm a hero. I will kill him and bring him back to my family. And then, of course, after the cave paintings, we got the best stories that came out after that were the Greek and the Roman myths that taught people how to behave. And then after the Greek and Roman myths, we got the greatest stories ever told, which is, what was that, the greatest stories ever told? The Bible. And the Bible was nothing more than hundreds, if not thousands, of little stories. Don't turn around or you'll turn into salt. Don't go down that mountain and smash those tablets. Don't eat that poison fruit. So after the Bible, we got Shakespeare, a guy named Billy S. And Billy S. invented two kinds of stories that we use today. He invented the comedy, which is the big happy face, and he invented the tragedy, which is the sad face. And those are the storytelling formats that exist today. All these years later, we moved from the Victorian novel, then we moved to radio, then we moved to TV and movies. And every TV show and every movie that you watch follows this pattern. And if it doesn't, it won't make it on the air, because this is the way the brain reacts. But yet somehow we know this. We go home and we turn on our favorite show on TV and we watch the V unfold. We don't leave in the middle of the show because we got to find out how they make that turn and how they save themselves. We know this. We do this. We watch this. But then when we go to work, the boss gets up there and he shows a PowerPoint with a bunch of numbers and a bunch of statistics and a bunch of sales goals. And you kind of sit there and you're listening, but your neural endings, they're not on fire. And it's so easy to put your neural endings on fire. Watch. So the boss calls me into the newspaper. He says, man, I'm getting a lot of complaints about you being a New Yorker and everything. You can't act like a New Yorker here in Texas. He says, you got to change your ways. He says, you can't ever use your car horn here, ever. And I said, why not? In Manhattan, we use it all the time. He said, no, here it is considered rude. And I got scared. I said, what happens if I'm about to be in a head-on collision? He goes, go ahead, but it'll be too late. And then he said, don't ever do what you probably did up north before you moved here. Don't ever give anybody an obscene gesture when you drive. Because you know what would happen in Texas, right? Right? They would shoot your finger off. And I was confused because I saw all these people running around doing this, and I didn't know what was going on. I thought they didn't get the memo, you know. And then he said, just behave and don't get in any trouble. So I remember going into a panic attack and thinking, I got to learn about Texas super fast if I'm going to be a columnist writing 3 times a week. So there was no internet yet, so I couldn't Google how to be a Texan. So I went to the library. I asked the librarian if she had any books on Texas, and she burst out laughing. And she said, that's the Texas wing over there. Because nobody's written more books about a state than they have about Texas. So I started pulling books. And the first book I pulled was called The History of the Fort Worth Fat Stock Show. And I didn't know what that was, but it turns out when I read the book, it has nothing to do with Wall Street, you know. And then the second book I read was called How to Talk Like a Texan. And I began to see what people were saying about me because I didn't understand the language. I'd walk into a room and then they go, there's that Yankee columnist, he keeps funning us. And I hear that they think I'm fun. And I thought, well, that's fine. But I got to the book and the book goes, oh no, they hate you. And then I saw that y'all can be singular with the plural of y'all, which is what? All y'all. And I fell in love with the word all y'all. I mean, I stopped using yous guys. And I love all y'all because it rhymes, it goes backwards and forwards. Don't you love all y'all, all y'all? And then I got to the back of the book where they traded expressions. And when I would meet like a Texas lady and she would ask me where I was from and what church I'd go to, she would just look at me and you know what she would say? Bless your heart. And I thought all these people were blessing my heart, but it turns out that they were just doing the Texas equivalent of the obscene gesture outside the car window, you know. So here we are, right? I've introduced the character, and now the character is being fought by the villain, and in this case, the villain is my ignorance, and the villain is driving me down to my low point. Okay, let's stop. So I'm looking at your faces, and you're all smiling, you're all engaged, but it's going to stop. And right now, I'm permission to get bored because Dave's about to start teaching storytelling again. I want you to understand that the way I teach is I interject. I do a story, and then I do some information facts, and then a story, and then some information and facts, and a story and information, because I don't want you to have time to get bored. I want to keep you up a little bit and then down a little bit and up a little bit and down because I think that's the way the brain works. I don't use PowerPoint because I think that a storyteller can stand up on a stage and do it themselves the right way. But there are 100 million practical applications of this formula, okay? And in your particular case, there's 3 areas that I want you to think about focusing your storytelling on. And I've identified these as your, quote, problem areas. They're not, in my mind, such problem areas because if most people haven't heard about it, you still have the ability to win them over. But the 3 areas that seem to be the most concern are 1, the environment, 2, the concerns about animal welfare, and 3, the most important one of all, is the health aspect of eating fish. So that's what I think we need to focus on here. Now, as far as business applications go, this formula that I've described works in everything. If you have to yell at your kids tonight, don't just give them bullet points. These are the 5 things that I want you to do. Make it into a story. I was planning to take you to the amusement park when I got home after my trip to Las Vegas, but now I see from the babysitter that you actually put crayon on the walls. I want you to go get that crayon and wipe it off, get that cleaner and wipe it off the wall so when I come home, everything is good and I can take you to the amusement park. When the boss wants to send out a note to the employees telling them, hey, turn off the electricity, I told you guys to turn off the computers at 5 p.m. when you leave the office because the electric bill was, $30,000 last month. That's really not going to get you to turn off the computer. So you got that idea, you got those bullet points you got to make, but then you figure out how can I turn it into Dave's magic V-shaped storytelling formula? Well, you basically just think about the V. Okay, folks, I've written you before about how to turn off the computers before you leave at 5, but you're not doing it. And I want to just say that if you don't do it, I'm probably going to have to lay off a couple of employees because our electric bill was $30,000 last month, and that's half a salary. So please turn off the computers at 5 to save the people that sit to the left of you, sit to the right of you, and yourself. Now, it's sort of tongue-in-cheek. Nobody's going to get laid off because they didn't turn off their computer, but it would scare the crap out of me if I got a memo and I'd be turning off my damn computer. And the point is I'd be paying attention because he followed my formula, which is what the brain requires. So you have to give how many of you are giving talks here in this conference? A whole bunch of you. I've never seen a conference that has more speakers. And I think that's great because that's 100% participation, whatever. But what I'd like you to think about doing is I'm pretty sure that 95% of you have your talks all done and they start off with some kind of thesis, hypothesis, a theory. This is what scientists do. But what can, that's how we think. We quickly put the facts together. But then how do we turn it into the V? How can I take my material and start off, by saying something like, well, Dave said I got to start with a V. I don't have a paintbrush with me. But let me tell you a quick story about how we overcame and then launch into it. And that story only really needs to be a few sentences. Because you can do this formula in like 7 or 8 words. Watch this. Had cat. Cat died. Got new cat. So everything works like this. Letters work like this. I know that, how many of you are academics? And I feel so bad for you because you are locked in to the most rigid writing format in Western civilization. Abstracts, footnotes, studies being, right in the middle of beautiful sentences, you have to say, opposite, Macintosh study, 2016 Tufts. I mean, it kind of breaks up the flow. But my favorite teachers in college were the ones that always told me the stories because my neural endings were on fire listening, and I learned and I remembered. Because the thing about stories is they come from the heart and they lead to emotion. And when you have heart, emotion, and passion, people listen. And as I said, you're not trying to sell fish farms in Idaho. You're trying to save humanity from itself. We are unsustainable if we continue at our current rate. Even I know that, and I'm not a scientist. So, more business applications, memos, reports, letters, emails, Facebook posts. Things happen in your world that are exciting every day. And you go home and you tell your spouse, you'll never guess what just happened at work today. We discovered blank. We did this. We helped someone do that. We had someone stop by who. All these really amazing things happen. And you go home and you tell your spouse. But that's not the audience. The audience is out there who want to hear all this. They want to know the cool stuff that's going on in your life. And you guys are just kind of letting it go. And I can say that because most people do that. They just kind of have this really amazing thing happen. They tell people about it 2 months later, and by then it's too late. But we now live in an instant story world where one Facebook post with one cool picture that has a beginning and a middle and an end, that's passionate, that's emotional, that comes from the heart, that answers questions and has heroes fighting villains, that flies through the universe. And that's what goes viral. And that's what you want. In the workshop that I'll be doing from 11 to 12:30, I'm going to do advanced storytelling tips. And I'm also going to show you how to pitch to the media in smart, very sophisticated ways so they actually pay attention. But right now, I think I want to go into another story because I can't go more than 8 or 10 minutes without bringing your brains back up, the neural endings. So here we go. So in Fort Worth, where I was living at the time, you need to have the cowboy costume. You can't dress like this in Fort Worth. It's Cowtown. So I decided to go to the boot store, and I asked the lady behind the counter if I could, buy a cowboy costume. And she says, Sonny, this ain't no Halloween store. What do you want? And I said, I want to get the pair of, and I named the Manhattan word. There's a Manhattan word. I said, I want to get a pair of the cowboy dungarees. And she says, I don't know what you're talking about, dungarees. She says, do you mean coveralls? And I don't know what coveralls are, but I come to find, that's a good expression, right, my Texas friends? I come to find that coveralls are what 82-year-old men wear to Sears on Saturday. And she says, what you want, and she teaches me a new word, which is what? What's the word for dungarees? Jeans. So she says, would you like cowboy cut or regular? And I said, I'll take whatever you recommend because I don't know what cowboy cut is. So she brings a pair of pants and she puts them down, and I look at the pants, and the pants stare back at me. And I say to her, I can't wear these. These are too stiff. She says, well, you just go try them on. I said, no, I'd have to take them home and stone wash them. And she says, what's that? And I said, that's what we did back in Manhattan. We put our jeans, our dungarees in the washing machine, and we circled 10 times, and then we put them in the dryer 10 times, and then they're soft. And she got all upset. She said, you ain't doing that here. Here you was taking them to the dry cleaners. And I said, well, why? And she says, because you want to get them pressed and creased and starched. And I said, well, where I'm from, when you want to wear nice clothes, you don't wear dungarees. And she got all upset. And she said, well, you ain't there no more, so hush up and try them on. So me and Mr. Blue Jeans, we walked together, And when I put those blue jeans on, I could not breathe. They were so tight. And I came out, I said, these are too tight. She said, let me see. Yeah, they fit real fine. Let's go get you a belt. And I remember saying, I got this belt here from Nordstrom. She said, that's a sissy belt. Let's get you a man's belt. And she sold me a belt with a buckle as big as my butt, you know. I come to find she was just funning me because you don't get the big buckle, you earn the big belt buckle. And then she sold me a hat that came in a big black cowboy hat cake box. And she sold me a shirt that snapped. And the belt, it had prongs, and the blue jeans were stiff. And the boots came in a white boot purse that you hold like this. And it came with a boot remover tool that you go like this. It doesn't take batteries, but it's called a boot jack. And so I take all the stuff, I put it on the chair in my bedroom, and I left it there for a couple of months and didn't know what to do with it. But then I got invited to a party, my first party, and it said, barbecue party, Fort Worth, RSVP, Western attire, please. And I had to get dressed up that night for my first party. And there in the mirror, I see the transformation from a New York Jew to like a Texas cowboy. And it's weird. I mean, I did it opposite. I apologize for the image, especially the ladies, because I put everything on backwards. I put the hat on first. I snap the shirt. I pull up the blue jeans. The belt had prongs. I didn't understand where they went, but they finally figured out. They go, here. I put the boots on, and I remember standing up and looking in the mirror. Wow, I don't recognize that guy. There he is, the Jewish Jesse James. And I said, you better smile when you say that, partner. And he didn't smile, so I went bang. And then I put my imaginary gun back in my imaginary holster. I knocked the keys off the counter accidentally, and without thinking about the belt, bent over to pick them up. And that belt cut me in half. And then I couldn't get back up because I couldn't bend my legs because the pants were so stiff. And I remember finally getting up, and I walked to the car like Lurch. And when I got in the car, I learned another lesson. I learned why cowboys don't drive little Hondas, because the hat gets crushed up against the roof. I'm driving and I get in there, and I'm thinking they're all going to laugh at me. But nobody laughed at me because I looked like everybody else for the first time, and it felt great. And I wrote a story about it in the newspaper, and nobody liked it. I should not have called it the cowboy costume. I should have used the right word, which was Western attire, you know. I was striking out. So in my story with you right now, I am down here at the bottom, and I'm not at my low point yet. That's coming, but I am so close to my low point. Can I talk to you for a moment about why the low point is so important? The low point is the part of the story where everything has gone to hell. And it's the part of the story where you never leave the movie theater, you never turn off the TV, because you've got to find out how the hero beats the villain. And the low point is what we want to dwell in, because the low point is where people learn. People don't learn from your success. If I were to told you I'd won 10 Pulitzer Prizes, you wouldn't give a damn. But if I told you I got fired from 3 newspaper jobs that I had, you'd be like, oh, what happened? Because we like to hear about the tough stuff, because we learn from the tough stuff. We don't learn from the successes of others. We learn from the mistakes, you know? So in your particular case, your low point, it's not as low as you might think it is, because I don't think your industry is in nearly as much trouble as you do, because you're going to be needed more than anything or anybody. But I think the low point for you are those 3 areas that I said: the health concerns, the fears that some have about the animal welfare, and also the environmental issues. And so you all know what you're doing to get around that. What is the heroic turn that you're making to solve environment, animal welfare, health problems? You know what you're doing, and you just have to tell people that. But you don't tell them like this: bullet point, bullet point, bullet point, bullet point, bullet point. Because they will listen and they will see it, but they won't remember in a year. But if you tell them like this, you'll never guess what happened last week. We found something really bad, but then we were able to work on it, our team worked on it, and now we have invented this, and we are now going to save the world. Does that make sense to you? I mean, it is so simple, it's ridiculous. All right. Are you ready for my low point? My low point is so humiliating that I cannot believe that I'm even saying it in front of you, because I don't like to talk about it. But it all happened. I was so desperate to get attention from the people that I was writing for, so desperate to get just a little bit of respect, that I decided to do something crazy. I decided to do something real Texan-y. I thought, what do they admire? What do they like? What do they look up to? How can I prove that I deserve to be here? They like the rodeo. I've never been to a rodeo. They like bull riding. They talk about the bull riding. I've never seen bull riding. I know what I'll do. I'll go ride a bull in a rodeo and then write about it, and they'll think I'm cool. Can I let that sink in for a moment? I mean, I didn't even know what it was. I didn't even go take out a videotape or anything. I just went to the library and took out a book called How to Ride a Bull in a Rodeo. And in my living room, I had an ottoman there, and I would just sit down on the ottoman after work, open up the book, and I would just practice reading the book. And the ottoman never threw me once. And I went ahead and found a rodeo that would let me enter. It was the First Baptist Church. They were having a church rodeo, and I went to their office, and I gave them $25 to enter, and I learned a new Texas word called waiver. And I signed the waiver, and I went back home, and I sat on my ottoman, and I practiced. And I went to talk to the boss at the paper, and I told her what I was planning, and she said, I forbid you from doing it. You'll get yourself killed. I said, no, I won't. It's a church rodeo. And she said, the bull don't know that. And we got into a big argument, and I think this was maybe the dumbest thing I've ever done in my entire life. She typed up a letter, and she said, I forbid you from doing this. But I told her it's Saturday night. It's my free time. So she says, it's your free time in the letter. So if you do get hurt doing this, you will not be able to claim company health insurance. I signed the letter. I didn't even read it. I was just so excited because when I rode this bull, everyone was going to like me. And I didn't even care that if I went to the hospital and spent $20,000, it was coming out of my pocket. I just signed my name. And she says, oh my God, you're so stupid. Don't die. And so I went home and I sat on the ottoman and I practiced. And this is my low point, because that Saturday night came and I drove out to a place called Azle, Texas, and I sat through this church rodeo. It was really cool. There were 200 Baptists there and me, and it starts off with the minister going around the arena on an old creaky bull, like opening ceremonies. Hey, everybody. Oh, look, there's Pastor Jimmy. Hey, hey, hey. Oh, and the bull's like, just so slow, and I'm thinking, that could be my bull. But it wasn't. So I sit through this rodeo. And at the end of the events, the last event, they go, all the bull riders, please report to the stalls. And so I got up, left my camera, my pen, and my book and my pad there because I was still cramming, walked in my stiff jeans, and there were 5 of the most handsome cowboy men standing there with straw coming out of their mouth just like this. And I say, hey, who are you guys? We're here to put you on the bull. Okay, but why does it take 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of you? You'll see. Get on number 1. So I remember walking over to number 1. There was a stall that said number 1. And I climbed over, and now I'm on this 1,200-pound dark bull, and his horns have been rounded. I thought the Baptists are really nice because that won't hurt so much. And the 10 arms of the 5 guys are doing all the things that they're doing, and I'm getting in the position because I look just like the guy in the book. Because I had all that ottoman rehearsal. I'm grabbing here. I got this up here. I got the hat on low. I got the chin tucked tight against my chest. My heels are in. My toes are out. And I'm just ready to go, man. I mean, back is straight. I'm clenching my legs. And my adrenaline is going whoosh. And how long's a good bull ride? 8 seconds. So the guy goes, are you ready? And I go, let's go, let's go, let's go, let's go, let's go, let's go. And they open up what do you call the door? The chute. And I'm on this bull for the next 10 seconds. The bull didn't read my book, though. He froze in the stall. And he just stood there for 8 of the longest seconds of my life. And I don't know what to do because the book didn't give me that scenario. But what's going on now is the Baptists are yelling, come on, ride him, ride him. He's Jewish. Ride him, ride him. And on the 8-second mark, this is on YouTube, this big guy comes up behind the bull and he goes, whoosh, and the bull shoots out. And that's how I got the other 1.6 seconds. So I'm in the air flying off the bull. And it's the most joyous ride I ever had. I'm in the air longer than I was in the bull. But when I land, all y'all are going to like me. Boom! And I remember landing, and I think I blacked out for a second because I forgot chapter 9, which started with the word run. And I remember getting up and going, I'm going to get up and run out of here before I get... And that's when the announcer said the nicest thing anybody had said about me in Texas. He goes, that was Dave Lieber from the Fort Worth Star-Telegram. You won't find anybody from the Dallas Morning News trying that. And that was like the Pulitzer Prize, you know. So I wrote about it in the newspaper. And the reaction of the Texans was, this New York moron rides a bull for 1.6 seconds and then has the audacity to write an article about it in my newspaper. I don't like him. I am now at the low point. Remember, I have to do something heroic to get out of the low point, right? Stop. Okay. So, you're thinking, this guy's up here. He's telling stories about bulls and, giving people the middle finger when he's driving and all that stuff. And that has nothing to do with my business. But it has everything to do with your business, because when I first started telling the story, I started with the bullet points. I was hurt. Nobody liked me. I had to save myself. What works? I rode a bull in a rodeo. So that's how it starts. That's how the brain functions. You start with the bullet points, okay? But then you have to turn it into the story. In my final 5 minutes, I'm going to share with you now how I got out of that by making that heroic turn. And if I can do it on this, anybody can do it. Because Texas was beating me up. I did something real Texan-y. After 8 or 9 months there, I decided to act like a Texan, and I did something that the Supreme Court told me to stop doing at high school football games. I decided to pray. There wasn't a lot of prayer in Manhattan growing up, but Texans are praying everywhere. The Supreme Court said stop doing it at football games. And I knew what to pray for. I needed to pray for a date. Because a guy like me cannot survive this kind of situation without some strong woman taking him around, giving him story ideas, introducing him to people, and in my ultimate fantasy, editing my articles before they went in the newspaper. But nobody would fix me up with their neighbor, their sister, because it'd be like, oh, I got a guy you could go out with, a Jewish bull rider from Manhattan. So I sat down one night in 1994 and I prayed. I said, dear Lord, I've been here for 9 months. I can't take it anymore. These Texans are killing me. If I hear one more Texan say, oh, that Dave Lieber guy, he just fell off the turnip truck, I don't know what I'm going to do, Lord, because I don't even know what a turnip truck is. But if you could send me a strong, mature, wise Texas woman, I will treat her with respect and dignity. And if you can send me a sign that a good woman is coming my way, I will hang on. Amen. And you know what happens when you pray in Texas? It works. I mean, not all the time, because Jerry Jones is still the general manager of the Dallas Cowboys. But 7 days after that event, that prayer, I was introduced to this woman in a fluke. Her name was Karen, and she had 2 kids and a dog that didn't like me. And we hit it off immediately. Karen took me around. She introduced me to people. She gave me story ideas. And my ultimate fantasy turned true. She started editing my stories, and she was magnificent with it. And I was like in heaven. I thought, this is amazing. I pray for a superwoman to come into my life, and just like that, she appears. The only problem was this dog. This dog absolutely hated me because the dog, little runt retriever named Sadie, she was a native Texan. And she would look at me all the time, and she'd just go, I mean, I tried to get her bones and meatballs and take her for walks, and everything was like, Now remember what I said, you got to go do something heroic. So I prayed, but how did I get to the top of the climax? And how did I beat the villain, which was my ignorance and the fact that the people in Texas didn't like my stories? I decided to do something really bold, maybe the bravest thing I did in my life. I decided to propose marriage in the newspaper, in an article. And my boss said, you can't do it. And I said, why not? And she said, because what if she says no? I said, we'll run a correction box. And I decided to go ahead and do it anyway, and I remember sitting down. It took me 3 days, but then I remembered the way to do it is to follow the V. And what am I going to write about? Am I going to write about Karen, about me, about the kids? No, I'm going to write about the dog, because when you write about a dog, people pay attention. I wrote a story once about a dog that could get beer out of the refrigerator. You might remember the Stroh's TV ad that came out years later that it was based on. People love to read about dogs. So in my opening line, in my V, I wrote the best sentence I will ever write in my life. Here in Texas, I've met the woman of my dreams. Unfortunately, she lives with the dog of my nightmares. And we went down, 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 down with my ignorance. And then I made that turn. And then I said to the readers at the end, I go, but now I see the whole of my life needs more than just a dog to fill it. Karen, there's something magical about you, me, the girl, the boy, and even your doggone little dog. I love you. I want to stay forever. I really do. Will you marry me? And that morning, October 2nd, 1994, while all y'all were asleep in bed, I'm just waking up, looking up at the ceiling. I'm hearing that newspaper hit the driveway at 5:30 in the morning. I grab it. The headline says, "Dogs all I need, not all I need to fill whole in my life." And I rush over to Karen's house, and I knock on the door, and I wake her up. It's very early, 6 a.m., and she says, "What are you doing here this early?" And I say, "I'm here to read you my column today." And she said, "Are you crazy? It's 6 a.m. I said, "I got to read it to you before anybody else does." And I just stood over. She went back to bed, and I just stood over the bed with the paper, and I just read her the story. And when I was done, I looked down at her, and the tears were coming down her cheek, and there was nothing happening, no answer. But then finally, her mouth went like this, which I knew wasn't it. And I hugged her, and then the kids woke up, and I told them what happened, and I proposed to them too. And then they said, "Go propose to the dog." And so I sat down beside the dog, and she started to shake because she had a fit every time I went near her. And I said, "Sadie, girl, you know what just happened here. Will you make it unanimous? Will you marry me?" And she just looked at me, and she went, But the story came out in the newspaper. That's how I got engaged on a vote of 3-1, by the way, right? So the story came out in the newspaper, and people followed it because it was about a dog, and they fell in love with the story. And they said, "Man, Mom, you got to read this. Husband, you got to read this." And everybody read it. People started calling the paper. This was before internet, before viral. And it was the year before the internet came. And they said to me, the paper said, "We got to put this out. We got to tell the readers." I said, "Well, I'll tell them next week." They go, "We got to tell them now." I said, "Well, how are you going to tell them?" And they said, "We'll figure it out." So they have an electronic message board on the airport freeway. And they changed it. It said, "Read the Star Telegram, time 4:51, temperature 81 degrees. Karen says yes." So we've been married now 23 years. We just celebrated our 23rd wedding anniversary yesterday here. Karen's sitting over there. And say hi, Karen. But what happened was the V changed my life. It established a relationship with the readers over that story because they begin to forgive me. They begin to see I'm like them now. I have a dog. I have kids. I'm going to be like them now. And also, it got me the top prize for American columns that year. So that's how I rely on the V and everything I do, and that's how I want you to. And at 11 o'clock, we'll talk about that in Versailles 3. But I just want to leave you with one thought, okay? When I had a physical therapist with a broken leg, he was pushing my leg and was hurting my leg when he was giving me therapy, but he was also telling me a story. And I always just listened to the story and I forgot about the pain. But then I told him, I said, "Hey man, try it without a story. Just do it, just so I see what happens." And he did it without it, and the pain was twice as great. So with the story, just a spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down. So I want you to stop thinking about the bullet points, stop thinking about the PowerPoint, start thinking about the emotion and the heart and the passion of what you do. And remember, you are here not working in aquaculture, but you are here today, and your life is devoted to one thing only, and that is to save humanity. I want to thank you very much. I'm really proud of you for listening to this storytelling. I'm proud of you for doing this thing. I love your logo. I feel like Grandfather Catfish teaching all the little fishies their stories. If you're ever in Grapevine, Texas, get a Lieber's lobster roll, and thank you very much.